in my videos, one of the things I'm trying to do is to put Eckhart Tolle's teachings from his book, The Power of Now, into a practical application, or at least to communicate to you how I've been putting his teachings into into practice. And I think that's helpful because sometimes when you discuss things that are metaphysical or that are deep, it's hard sometimes to make that transition from understanding it conceptually to living it practically. And one of the things that Eckhart Tolle talks about in his book, The Power of Now, is he talks about resist nothing. He says resist nothing. And I'm going to adjust this a little bit because of the sunlight. But resist nothing. That made me think a lot about, okay, what does that mean to resist nothing? And it's easy to misunderstand what Eckhart Tolle is talking about when he says resist nothing. There's a quote that you've probably heard before. It says, what you resist persists. And when Eckhart Tolle talks about resist nothing, what he's talking about is not denying the reality of what is. And a lot of times our circumstances are different than what we expected. A lot of times our circumstances are different than what we want. When that happens, a lot of us have a tendency to internally resist what is, to resist the reality with which we are presented. And that's what Eckhart Tolle is talking about when he says resist nothing. He means for us to accept and embrace the reality with which we are presented internally. So that doesn't mean that we will never, that we'll be necessarily happy about all of the circumstances with which we're presented. But it does mean that we fully accept it. That means we can fully accept certain situations, even though we're not happy about it. And let me give you an example of how that works. So, the other day I was at work, and it was just one of those days where anything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. I mean, one problem. It started out with one problem. And then when I went to solve that problem, two more problems came up. And then when I went to solve those two problems, three more problems came up. And so I don't know if you've ever had one of those days before, but it was just one thing after another. Now, Eckhart Tolle teaches us that when we live in the now, there are no problems. There are life situations, and there are things that we need to address, but the difference is in our mentality, how we view it from our mental perspective. And one thing that Eckhart teaches that was really helpful for me to know how to interpret my life circumstances is he talks about relationships. And one of the things he says about relationships is for us to not view relationships as something to make us happy. So we shouldn't pursue a relationship for the purpose of making us happy. We should view our relationships as a way for us to become more conscious, more spiritually aware, more spiritually awake. Now, when we view our relationships that way, then things that happen in the relationship, we don't interpret those things, those hurts, those disappointments, those unmet expectations. We don't interpret them as happening to us. We see them as happening for us, for our spiritual growth and development. Having said that, we can extrapolate from that gem of truth and incorporate that into a larger picture that life itself is not here to make us happy, but it is here to enable the divine purpose of the universe to unfold. And that is continual growth into a higher level of consciousness and spiritual awareness. So when I had that day at work where all of these obstacles presented themselves, the way I viewed it was as if the universe was calling me to a higher level of awareness, a higher level of consciousness. And that's not easy to do, especially in the moment, because you have a task, you have to get that task done in a certain amount of time, all of these different problems presenting themselves. It's sometimes even feels like, man, why is this happening? You're tempted to go into the mindset of, why is this happening to me? But what we learn through the power of now is to view it as, this is happening for me, for my growth and development.